rooms in an inn, at least there were two or three wooden chairs in each, and a deal table in one, and Mr. W and the Count de B looking out for us. Colonel Y had not yet made his appearance. Toluca, a large and important city, lies at the foot of the mountain of San Miguel de Tutucuitlalpico, and is an old, quiet, good looking, respectable seeming place, about as sad and solitary as Puebla. The streets, the square, and the churches are clean and handsome. To the south of the city lie extensive plains covered with rich crops, and about 10 miles in the same direction is a volcano. We walked out in the afternoon to the Alameda, passing under the portales, handsomer and cleaner than those of Mexico, and sat down on a stone bench beside a fountain, a position which commanded a beautiful view of the distant hills and of the volcano, behind which the sun was setting in a sea of liquid flame, making it look like a great pearl lying amongst melted rubies. The Alameda has not been much ornamented, and is quite untenanted, but walks are cut through the grass, and they were making hay. Everything looked quiet and convent like, and a fine fresh air passed over the new mown grass, inclining to cold, but pleasant. The volcano is scooped out into a natural basin, containing, in the very midst of its fiery furnace, two lakes of the purest, coldest, and most transparent water. It is said that the view from its summit, the ascent to which is very fatiguing, but has been accomplished, is beautiful and extensive. On the largest lake travellers have embarked in a canoe, but I believe it has never been crossed, on account of the vulgar prejudice that it is unfathomable, and has a whirlpool in the centre. The volcano is about 15,000 feet above the level of the sea, and 9,000 above Toluca. It is not so grand as Popocatepetl, but a respectable volcano for a country town, muy decente, very decent, as a man said in talking of the pyramids that adorn the wonderful cavern of Cucuhuamilpa. We ordered supper at the inn, and were joined by the Commandante of Toluca, Don M A, the officer who came out to meet us when we arrived in Mexico. I regret to state that such a distinguished party should have sat down, 6 in number, to fowl and frijoles, with only 3 knives and 2 forks between them. The provident travellers had, however, brought good wine, and if our supper was not very elegant, it was at least very gay. Colonel Y arrived about 10 o'clock, but it is agreed that the animals require 1 day's rest, and we shall consequently spend to morrow at Toluca. 17th. We have spent this day in arranging our route, in which we are guided not by the most direct, but the most agreeable, in walking through the city, which in the time of federalism was the capital of the state, in climbing some of the steep roads cut through the hills at whose base it lies, and in admiring the churches and convents, and broad well paved streets, with their handsome houses painted white and red. It is decided that the first night of our pilgrimage we shall request hospitality at the hacienda of the ex Minister Hechavarria, La Gabia, which is about 10 leagues of very bad road from Toluca, which is 16 from Mexico. All these important arrangements being made, and a sketch of our journey traced out, we are about retiring to rest in the agreeable prospect of not entering any 4 or 2-wheeled vehicle, be it a cart, carriage, coach, or diligence, till we return here. La Gabia, 19th. To get under way the first morning was a work of some difficulty. Mules to be loaded, horses to be fitted with saddles, and one mule lame, and another to be procured, and the trunks found to be too heavy, and so on. We rose at 5, dressed by candlelight, took chocolate, put on our mangas, and then planted ourselves in the passage looking down upon the patio, to watch the proceedings and preparations. Colonel A arrived at 7 with a trooper, to accompany us part of the way, and we set off while it was cool, without waiting for the rest of the party. Toluca looked silent and dignified as we passed through the streets with its old convents and dark hills. The road after leaving the city was stony and mountainous, and having reached a small rancho with an old oratorio beside it, we halted to wait for our travelling companions. Colonel A amused us with an account of his warfare against the Comanches, in which service he had been terribly wounded. Singular contrast between these ferocious barbarians and the mild Indians of the interior. He considers them an exceedingly handsome, fine looking race, whose resources both for war and trade are so great that were it not for their natural indolence, the difficulties of checking their aggression would be formidable indeed. Colonel A being obliged to return to Toluca, left us in charge of his trooper, and we waited at the rancho for about half an hour, when our party appeared with a long train of mules and mozos, the gentlemen dressed Mexican fashion as well as their men, the best dress in the world for a long equestrian journey. Colonel Y had stayed behind to procure another mule, and there being two roads, we, as generally happens in these cases, chose the worst, which led us for leagues over a hilly country, unenlivened by tree, shrub, bush, or flower. The sun was already high, and the day intensely hot. We passed an occasional poor hut; a chance Indian passed us, showed his white teeth, and in spite of the load on his back, contrived to draw his hat off his matted locks, and give us a mild "good morrow." But for the rest, from Dan to Beersheba, from Toluca to La Gabia, all was barren. By 12 o'clock we might have fancied ourselves passing over the burning plains of Mesopotamia, notwithstanding an occasional cold breeze which swept across us for a moment, serving only to make us feel the heat with greater force. Then barranca followed barranca. The horses climbed up one crag and slid down another. By 2 o'clock we were all starving with hunger, but nothing was to be had. Even Nebuchadnezzar would have found himself at a nonplus. The Count de B contrived to buy some graniditas and parched corn from an Indian, which kept us quiet for a little while, and we tried to console ourselves by listening to our arrieros, who struck up some wild songs in chorus, as they drove the wearied mules up the burning hills. Every Indian that we met assured us that La Gabia was cerquita, quite near, detrás lomita, behind the little hill, and every little hill that we passed presented to our view another little hill, but no signs of the much wished for dwelling. A more barren, treeless, and uninteresting country than this road, on which we have unanimously revenged ourselves by giving it the name of the Road of the 300 Barrancas, led us through, I never beheld. However, it's a long lane that has no turning, as we say in Scotland. And between 3 and 4 La Gabia was actually in sight, a long low building, whose entrance appeared to us the very gates of Eden. We were all, but especially me, who had ridden with my veil up, from a curiosity to see where my horse was going, burnt to the colour of Pawnee Indians. We were most cordially welcomed by Señor Hechavarria and his brothers-in-law, and soon refreshed by rest and an excellent dinner. Fortunately, K and I had no mirrors, but each gave such a flattering description of the other's countenance that it was quite graphic. This beautiful hacienda, which formerly belonged to the Count de Regla, whose possessions must have been royal, is 30 leagues in length and 17 in width, containing in this great space the productions of every climate, from the fir-clad mountains on a level with the volcano of Toluca, to the fertile plains which produce corn and maize, and lower down to fields of sugar cane and other productions of the tropics. We retired to rest betimes, and early this morning rode out with these gentlemen about 5 leagues through the hacienda. The morning was bright and exhilarating, and our animals being tired, we had fresh, strong little horses belonging to their stud, which carried us delightfully. We rode through beautiful pine woods and beside running water, contrasting agreeably with our yesterday's journey, and were accompanied by 3 handsome little boys, children of the family, the finest and manliest little fellows I ever saw, who, dressed in a complete Mexican costume, like 3 miniature rancheros, rode boldly and fearlessly over everything. There was a great deal of firing at crows and at the wild duck on a beautiful little lake, but I did not observe that any one was burdened with too much game. We got off our horses to climb through the wooded hills and ravines, and passed some hours lying under the pine trees, listening to the gurgling of the little brook, whose bright waters made music in the solitude, and, like the soldiers at the pronunciamiento, but with surer aim, pelting each other from behind the parapets of the tall trees with fir tops.